G'day guys, how's it going? Rukshan here. I hope you're enjoying your Saturday for those of you joining from Australia, and welcome to anyone else who's watching from around the world. I have a few stories to get through today, so I'll jump straight into it. First up is this story around Hertz, a rental car company, massive presence here in Australia and of course around the world. A few years back, they jumped in head first into this whole electric car business that we get pushed a lot right these days, right? About EV cars. And you see from the governments, you see from industries, there's this massive push to change everything towards electric cars. Well, Hertz jumped into this not that long ago, and I think they settled on buying about 100,000 electric cars by this year. But as it turns out, there's been a bit of a twist in this story. So I'm going to read you this story from a couple of days ago. This is in the New York Post. Rental car giant Hertz on Thursday said it will sell off about 20,000 electric vehicles from its fleet and buy more gas-powered cars. A stunning reversal after tapping NFL legend Tom Brady to tout its transition to EVs. The company said that the high cost to repair electric vehicles and a lack of demand amongst renters led to its decision to abandon those plans. Now, I can completely see this happening because it is such a great inconvenience, using an electric car, particularly if you're renting one to go traveling, because you've got to plan your whole journey around, where you can actually charge your vehicles. I don't know about the infrastructure in the US because I haven't used one there, but in Australia at least, if you're doing long distance trips, I see these people with electric cars planning out these extravagant journeys, and it involves the time it takes to charge the vehicle. I guess that's a part of being an early adopter. I also remember when I was in London in an EV taxi, this taxi driver was just complaining to me how it's just such a nuisance to have to go wait and line up to charge his taxi when he could be doing work, just because he's decided to use an EV vehicle, because I think there's some sort of subsidy program or some sort of benefits there in the UK if you have an EV. So, the world has jumped headfirst into this EV business, and the technology, with Tesla, all this kind of stuff is great in many instances, but you have this, what Hertz is saying is expensive repair costs and lack of interest from people. And I would just say a lot of that lack of interest really comes from the fact that if you are renting a car on a holiday, you want to be able to go to a petrol station quickly, fill up, put some gas into it, and get moving, right? That's how I think. Personally, I would not rent an electric car if I traveled. And I think Hertz has found out the hard way after going, really strongly into this, that it's not quite working out. And this actually comes on the head of some other news that I saw 2 days ago. There was a bus in Wimbledon in the UK that had caught on fire, an electric bus. So let me just read you this story. Residents in Wimbledon were awoken up to a loud bang after a double-decker electric bus caught fire during the busy school run. The Met Police declared a critical incident after the blaze broke out at 7 a.m. this morning. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it seems like the lithium battery or whatever in that bus exploded, and it was just engulfing the whole thing, this double-decker bus in London. And, what we're hearing from firefighters is that after one of these fires takes hold in these electric vehicles, it's very hard to put out. So you have this issue, and we've seen videos from all parts of the world, particularly coming from China, of these electric buses just blowing up. Even when they're in stationary, garaged, randomly they just blow up and combust. We have issues with electric scooters. We have issues with other cheap electric products that are coming from different parts of the world just blowing up as well in people's houses. So clearly the technology, even though everyone has moved into this technology very rapidly, and there's a massive push towards this from all sectors, particularly very progressive style governments that want to cut diesel powered cars and gas powered cars and petrol powered cars. There hasn't been the the safety standards perhaps aren't catching up in the same manner. Let me know what you guys think. Do you have an electric vehicle? Do you think it's the future, or do you think there's a bit more years to go when it comes to the improvement in technologies before we can ditch our normal gas powered cars? Now, the second story I have revolves around the ABC, our ABC, that's right. So you might have remembered probably around a month ago, Antoinette Lattouf, ABC journalist in Sydney, radio show host, was let go because some complaints that were coming through to the ABC regarding her reporting on the Israel and Gaza conflict. And they just, I guess, sacked her. They fired her. And I did a story about it then as well, just showing you, that Lattouf perhaps understood the way that she was reporting, may have included certain particular biases that she has, because she has very strong views about the war that's happening in Israel and Gaza right now. Well, she has taken ABC to the court. She did make note of that right after her dismissal, but we've since discovered that she is also suing the ABC, not just, well, for the wrongful sacking, but also saying that there's racism at the ABC, racial discrimination. So, and I'm just going to read this article from news.com.au. An experienced ABC host who was sacked only hours after sharing a social media post about the Gaza war claims she was discriminated against because of her Arab background. Fill-in host for Sydney Morning's Radio Antoinette Lattouf was fired by the ABC last month after reporting a story about Human Rights Watch alleging Israel was using starvation as a weapon in Gaza. Ms. Lattouf, who is of Lebanese descent, has alleged in a complaint to Fair Work Commission that she was humiliatingly fired for expressing a political opinion and because of her race. Now, the reason I'm bringing this story up again is because we've had another ABC journalist of Lebanese background. Her name is Noor Haidar. She has also resigned. She hasn't been fired. She has resigned from the ABC. And this is what her story says. Noor Haidar, a political reporter in the ABC's Parliament House Bureau, has resigned over concerns relating to the national broadcast coverage of the conflict between Israel and Hamas, as well as treatment of its culturally diverse staff. She told the Masthead her decision was straightforward after the broadcast's coverage came under scrutiny from journalists within its own newsroom since October 7th. I have resigned from the ABC. This was not a decision that I made lightly, but one I made with total clarity. Commitment to diversity in the media cannot be skin deep. Culturally diverse staff should be respected and supported even when they challenge the status quo. Death and destruction on the scale we have seen over recent months has made me reassess my priorities. So we did have this instance back then, I think almost a week or so after the conflict kind of got underway, when Israel started to attack Hamas in Gaza. A lot of the journalists around Australia started, sign this petition, sign this letter regarding the need to treat the coverage of the information coming from Hamas, practically that's what they were saying, as the same as the information that was coming out of Israel, the IDF, at that time, almost the same way. And this was one of their major complaints. Now, we've seen since these journalists like Noor Haidar and Antoinette Lattouf fired or resigned around this issue, and they're saying it's about racially discriminating against people who are Arab in background because of their coverage of this particular story. I mean, that's the sense that I'm getting from this. Now, I have my own views on this. I have lots of issues with ABC for starters, and I've made them very clear that I think they should be defunded. And, we have so many activists at the ABC who are parading around as journalists. And the reason that it's important is, and you might say that I'm parading around as a journalist, but the reason that's important is ABC is a taxpayer-funded venture, right? People in this country, their taxes go towards it, and there's an expectation based on the charter that the ABC have that the news and information that they present is, broadly representative of Australia and Australian values and the entire community when they communicate these messages. I think that's a fair compromise if you're taking money from the taxpayer. But what we're seeing, I think, is, and I see this very broadly, and people might get offended by me saying this, but because we live in a multicultural country and we do have people who work in the media who are from these Arab backgrounds, who are from this conflict zone, they have a particular set of views and values around this as well, which, maybe other Australians might not necessarily understand or even relate to, but that informs their reporting. They almost can't distance themselves from that. And I think they want to be able to ensure that those kind of ideas, which is what Haidar is here saying about the cultural diversity of the peoples who work there, their views coming through as well, they want to be able to express that. Now, I don't necessarily think that that is a part of what the ABC should be doing. Again, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but if there was a conflict happening in Sri Lanka, I wouldn't, as a Sri Lankan, this is me personally, think that I should report it to you based on the Sri Lankan narrative or the Sri Lankan worldview. Like, that's not how I think this works, because I'm an Australian journalist. I have Australian values, and I'm representing the community and the interests of this country. that's kind of how I approach these type of things. So yes, it's great to have multiculturalism. It's wonderful to have multiculturalism, but I don't necessarily think it has to inform the journalistic standards or the way that news is delivered in this country. Cultural diversity within the news landscape. Yeah, it's great to have people that look like me, for instance, working at the ABC. Okay, cool. We're culturally diverse, but that doesn't really transcend into telling people, hey, in our culture, we believe that these people are, resistance fighters, as an example. Or in our culture, the piracy in the Red Sea, that's an act of resistance. Like, so we're going to explain it to you in this way. Again, I'm just using very generalized examples there, but you get kind of what I'm trying to say. Let me know what you guys think. But again, the more activist journalists who are out of the ABC, and the more journalists who are there that are just presenting information to people, both sides, without too much activism, too much emotion, I think it's better value for the Australian taxpayer. Again, that's my personal view. Sticking on with this theme of what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and we have to keep talking about this because the news is always evolving around this. Yesterday we had the Houthis being attacked by the US and the UK with Australia's support. There's been more attacks today, I believe, in the last hour or so that's been reported on. So it's an ongoing thing, and there's a lot of support I'm seeing online for the Houthi rebels from Australia. Like, a lot of people very openly supporting the Houthis, regardless of their past, which I discussed yesterday. At the same time, we had the ICJ court hearings happening at The Hague in Netherlands, and we had Israel mounting their defense yesterday. I watched that. That was quite interesting. I might do a deeper analysis and breakdown of both sides' cases next week. Speaking of South Africa, interestingly, there's another story related somewhat to this, and that is that South Africa is hosting the Under-19 Cricket World Cup. And a surprising twist to all this is that there's a link to Sri Lanka. I am Sri Lankan, but that's because Sri Lanka actually got disqualified from hosting it, and so South Africa's taken over. But what's happened since is the Under-19 cricket team in South Africa, their captain, who is of Jewish descent, has been stood down from the captaincy because he is Jewish, but for his own safety, to protect him from the possibility of protests that might take place during the Under-19 World Cup. So this is in 2024. We have people living in countries outside of that region who are having to, because of their Jewish descent, the authorities in South Africa are having to take them off certain roles to ensure their safety can be protected. Now, a bit of this statement, I'll read it. It's a bit of a remarkable statement, if you ask me. As is the case with all such events, Cricket South Africa has been receiving regular security and risk updates regarding the World Cup. We have been advised that protests related to the war in Gaza can be anticipated at venues for the tournament. We have also been advised that there's likely to focus on the position of the South African Under-19's captain, David Teager, and that there is a risk that they could result in conflict or even violence, including between rival groups of protesters. Cricket South Africa has a primary duty to safeguard the interests and safety of all those involved in the World Cup and must accordingly respect the expert advice of those responsible for the safety of participants and spectators. I mean, what do you guys think of that? I mean, if that was here and this happened, I think there'd be an outroar around it, right? It's happening in South Africa, who's currently presenting their court about human rights violations to the ICJ. But you can see in South Africa itself, a Jewish person can't be the captain of a cricket team because it's a security risk. Yeah, something to think about. And last up, I have a somewhat of a feel-good story. Someone actually told me in the comments, Rukshan, can you share some good news sometimes as well? So I don't know if this is good news. Some people might interpret this as good news. Other people may not. I'm not condoning this particular behavior, by the way. And I'll just get this article up from news.com.au. Jacinda Ardern and Clark Gayford's wedding picketed by anti-vaxxers. Anti-vax protesters have picketed outside the former New Zealand Prime Minister's wedding to Clark Gayford at one of the country's most elite vineyards. That's right, guys. Jacinda Ardern is getting married to her long-term partner. I heard another news story that she's having a fully COVID-safe wedding. And before the wedding and everything, she was masked up on the flights and getting there. And she was pictured with her full mask coverings in 2024, of course. And yeah, now somehow protesters have found out the location of where that is happening, and they have been protesting outside of Jacinda Ardern's wedding. Now, this is a woman, of course, that cancelled many other people's weddings and many occasions for people to see their loved ones, and even told us that she was the single source of truth, as in the government. And today, there is a bit of, I guess, drama in her life with protesters turning up to her wedding. Again, look, I'm not condoning this behavior. I think private lives of these politicians and any leaders, especially their time with families, they should be left alone, regardless of our views and thoughts about these people, particularly after they've left office. But I can understand why there are people in the community who have been so adversely impacted by the decisions of people like Jacinda Ardern, who are now taking it upon themselves to make sure that she never forgets what she has put them through. So, interesting story, good news story. You guys tell me. Anyway, guys, thank you again for joining me on a Saturday. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. I will be back tomorrow as well with another news report. Potentially I could be again out on the streets covering some of the protests which are happening tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure what I'll be doing. Again, guys, don't forget to subscribe to The Real Rukshan on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, and Odyssey. Hit that notification bell if you want to get updates, because I think you gotta, like everyone else says this on these YouTube shows, so I'm just saying that as well. It must do something. All right, guys, take care. Bye.